Hey, everybody, welcome to my guest tonight. I'm Jeff Revilla, your host. I've got Dr. Albert Bramante. We got a talent agent, psychologist.
Yo, it's my guest tonight with Jeff Revilla, bringing heat like a scene from a thriller. Dr. Bramante in the house, breaking mental chains. From Broadway lights to big screen fame, talent agent, mind coach, triple threat mode, helping actors crack the success code. So turn it up, no fear, no strife. Let's talk self-sabotage and change your life.
I get so excited about these songs.
I really like the graphic of me bopping a little bit to it. That was pretty cool too.
So for each of my guests, I try to make a song that matches, though. And I knew that you were in the New York Broadway area, so I was thinking 90s hip hop and this great, like the sax background on it. And it turned out really well. I hope you enjoyed the song. It's one of my favorite parts of the show.
I really did. I really did. Absolutely. That was a lot of fun.
And it turns out you're from Jersey, so I wasn't too far off geographically. And when you were coming up in Jersey, when did you first fall in love with entertainment? Did your love for entertainment come first?
No.
No.
I mean, it was always in a back burner, but I was your typical, and I still am, a nerd. I always was. I was a bookworm, 100%. And I was very different from my family because my family was all athletes. My brothers, my father, my cousins, male cousins especially, were all into athletics. Football, baseball. My father was a coach. My older brother was a coach. For me, I just couldn't really identify with sports. I had no interest and obviously, and even no ability too. So I very poor hand-eye coordination, and naturally, of course, everyone tried to put a ball and glove in my hand and helmet on me, to try to toughen me up, and it wasn't working. So, but I found books to be like my sanctuary. So I read a lot as a kid and as a teenager, and I still read a lot now. So I was hell bent on being a psychologist since high school. I was reading books about the brain, reading books about behavior, and reading books about psychotherapy. And it was so interesting to me and so fascinating that I was like, I really want to do this for the rest of my life. So, but I was also interested a little bit in creativity and creative arts. Like I was in a drama club in high school. My undergraduate college years, I took a few classes in acting and theater, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's still at this point, I was still going to be a PhD. I'm going to be a clinical psychologist. I made a promise to my late grandmother that I was going to be a doctor. I mean, obviously, I didn't become a medical doctor, but next best thing. So, but I always, in the back of my mind, still had a very interest in acting. Now, I tried it a little bit. I was an actor myself for a hot minute, and for me, I liked being around actors. I liked the vibe of artists and the theater scene. It was so exciting and so fulfilling for me. But I really, for acting, it wasn't for me. I enjoyed working behind the scenes more. And so that's where I started. I found I really shined was working, helping actors. So I worked with professional working actors for a long time. And even when I was transitioning kind of out of acting, I would always find myself finding notices for actors, finding casting calls for actors, and looking for things for other actors. And I remember a few of the actors I was kind of like friends with said, "Hey, I wish you could be my unofficial agent." And then a wheel started turning. And then kind of one thing led to another after I did some searching. That's what I decided to do. It was like 2004, I started my first company, pretty much out of my bedroom. And haven't really looked back since. Now, I was still had an interest in psychology. I was teaching even part time at a community college. I still do that now, and that was really exciting for me. So I was like, let me finish. Let me go back to school. I'm halfway through it. Let me fulfill the promise, not only to my grandmother, to my family, to myself. I'm going to finish and go for my PhD. And I went for it. Now, what brings us kind of full circle with all this type of work that I'm doing, for my doctoral dissertation, which is a huge thesis that all doctoral candidates must complete, I did mine on self defeating behavior in performing artists. And so that kind of led me to years later turn that into my book, which because of that, here I am, in a sense of that space. So all my worlds kind of came together in a beautiful way.
And that's one thing I really like about your story is you have this unique skill set, but when you go back to, you were younger, you started to get involved in books and reading, you were familiar with the drama club, and you were friends with actors, and you go to college to get your doctorate, and you're studying psychology, and you're studying the behaviors of these actors, and it's really the perfect storm that's come together to make you who you are today and what you're doing, and that part of your story to me was so interesting, and that's why I wanted to have you here tonight is because these 2 very different worlds that you don't think about just collided, and it really brought you to they kinda happened simultaneously, but, they kinda just meshed together like 2 magnets, and now you this force that does, um and I don't wanna I'm not gonna get into too much of it yet, but the way that you're able to work with actors and coach them is a very big part of that journey to get you to where you are today.
100%. And it was a journey. There was a lot of hard work getting there. And yeah, the PhD, the educational component, the classwork was kind of a breeze for me. The dissertation was no joke. It was probably one of the most intense things I've been a part of, ever done. And that's what really is the defining moment of a PhD. And that's why we really have the word doctor for our name is really that final project. So it was definitely one of the most monumental things I've ever had to complete. So much so, I'm when people ask me, will I ever go back? No, I'm done with school, formal schooling.
Let's go back to
Yeah.
that oh,
Mhm.
I would say let's go back to that first company you started. You mentioned you kinda just touched on it a little bit, but what was the genesis of that company and what were the services you were trying to provide at that time?
Well, I still do it now, but the purpose was to represent actors and to support actors as much as possible. I At that time when I first saw the company, I was like, I really don't know what this is going to look like. I mean, ideally, it was to help actors get work and to kind of be just a cheerleader for them and be a support system as much as I possibly could. Yeah, I was naive, and when I this is like my first. It was my first real world experience of operating a business, owning a business, and really working in the entrepreneurial world. So it was a new world for me, and I kind of went into the business with blind, complete blinders. And what I mean by blinders, most people who get into this space that I'm at start off usually interning or walking in a mailroom or working as an executive assistant, and then maybe go up the ranks to junior agent to agent, and then or already an established agent, and then kind of break off on their own after several years. For me, I'm just like, I'm going to go right into it. I have no experience, so I'm just going to do it. People, if I were to give it like if I had a magic wand, if I had to go back, I probably would go that route if I could. Like this way, and maybe that would have prevented some of the hardships, some of the mistakes I've made. As a new business owner. So, and I would say the biggest realization of it. Now, I love working with actors. The actors itself was great, but it is a very intense industry and sometimes cutthroat, which someone like me was not used to. So that was a heavy adjustment period for me. So for a few years, I was like, I don't think I could do this. And there are plenty of times where I was about to call it quits because I'm not a cutthroat person. That's not how I operate. However, I was in there, and there were some, if you want to use a metaphor, there were some sharks in the water.
Did
I
you
haven't
find
encountered one.
yourself did you find yourself developing talent and then other agents would just come by and poach them?
Absolutely, other than a poach and no regret. Or, and the one thing I think that it was or other people pretending to be your friend, and then when they had a moment, it was just they come and sneak into it. Now, looking back into it now, with many years later, yeah, there were some signs. I was like, oh, I was pretty naive. I might even slap myself around a little bit for falling for it a little bit because it was kind of plainly obvious what was happening. So that's where maybe the education of working at another company could have warned me about. Um, so like I'll give you an example. Now, anytime I work with an artist, I have a contract. I'm not working for anybody or on anybody's behalf without a contract. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an inclusive contract. It could be like a freelance or just there's no commitment, but there's still a contract to where, if I get you a job, you're gonna pay me 10% and I'm gonna be supportive and all of that. So it's a two-way contract, but that's one of the things I've learned, over the years is I'm working with a contract. And even if somebody hires me to do anything else, we're doing something in writing first.
Do you have like a clause in your contract and you read it and you're like, I know exactly why that clause is in this contract?
Yes, of course. And a lot of times, the contracts that we use as talent agents is pretty standard that most agents use. It's, because we have to be compliant with the performance unions and the guilds and all that. So but there are a lot of stuff in there. I'm like, yes, I know why that's in there. And it's much easier now. And so that's where I think I've wisened up a lot over that. And again, even if somebody's like, "Hey, I want to collaborate with you on this," another, okay, we're gonna put an agreement together before I give you any information about anything that can be sensitive.
You kind of worked out that part of the business a little bit. It's never perfect. You still take on new clients. There's new expectations, and every client is different. But you also have this other side of the business where the coaching and the way you guide people or help even actors with cold feet. So tell us a little bit about how you're applying, you know, maybe some of the things that you have the doctorate in to this business to help actors and actresses excel.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I mainly when I work with as far as coaching, I work more on the softer skill side of things rather than the acting side because I don't have an acting degree. Even though I dabbled in acting, I don't consider myself an expert in acting. So they need to get coaching and training professionally on the acting side, and there's plenty of resources that I will refer them to. That is much more qualified for me. For me, I'm more of the mindset approach. So one thing that I can do is work with the amount of self doubt that comes in, the imposter syndrome aspect that happens with a lot of actors. There's so much competition. It's a saturated market in New York City for actors. There's hundreds of thousands of actors and only a limited number of roles. That's the reality of business. And I can't do anything about that. That's the way it is. So what can we do to maximize this? Well, the one thing you're going to need, especially for anybody who's listening that wants to pursue acting or into art, you're going to need grit, you're going to need resilience, and you're going to need tenacity. Those are skills that you'll not be taught in an acting class, but those are needed. And that's really with any business or any entrepreneurship is you need tenacity, grit, and resilience, which because it's a long-term business. A lot of times young actors, they have the stars in their eyes, bright lights, they see New York City, the promenade, they go on Broadway, you see Broadway, and they're so excited, which is great, and it is exciting. However, it's going to take years to get a strategy together. And you need a strategy as an actor. So, and it's going to take time. The other thing that really I work with actors to do is to not take the no's personally, because you're going to get a lot of no's. That's the reality of it. And what makes it a little bit more difficult is a lot of times you don't even hear back after an actor auditions or goes on an interview. There's no response. I mean, sometimes rare, or sometimes you may get the occasional, thank you for your audition. We went in another direction. But for the most part, you don't hear that, which I know can be hard for anybody. So the one thing that I really hope to impart is to not take this work personally, to not take the no's personally, because it's not about you. It's about the role. Are you right for the role? It has nothing to do with you personally. So that's why, like, I'll hear a lot of people say, I gave up because of rejection, or I want to be an actor, but I'm so afraid of the rejection. I don't want to be rejected. Well, I'd say, what if we took rejection out of it? Because rejection sounds personal. Like they rejected you. No, they just didn't go with you for that character. So the one quote which I heard years ago, I don't remember the author. I don't know the author, the origin of the quote, but it really resonated with me. And it's, there's no such thing as rejection. It's just a simple reminder that your services are not needed today, which for me even helped me out a great deal. And I'm not an actor, but I think if we take it that way and look, okay, you're not right for the role, but this doesn't tell you anything about you as an actor, you as a person. So take the person out of it, take the I away from it. And so that would be like number one. The other thing that I would say is to look at failure or even the mistakes that you make as feedback, not a failure in a sense. So there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So if you can take that and say, okay, I didn't get the role, or I flubbed the line, or man, I really tanked that interview. And this is not just for actors, but for anybody. I really didn't do well in this area. Well, okay, well, let's take let's take a step back. What did you learn from this? What can you do differently the next time? Because as human beings, we're going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes in business. I can tell you a lot of things. I've made numerous mistakes in my life, personally, professionally, and there it is what it is. It's a mistake. So, but what I can do is learn from that mistake and make sure that in the future I can act in a different way. So again, no such thing as rejection, and really no such thing as failure. So, and I think the third and most important piece of it, not to say the other two aren't, but important, but the third piece would be to treat the audition as an opportunity to perform. So yes, prepare, but have fun with it. A lot of times, just the word audition sounds daunting. It sounds, oh, like such a burden, because a lot of times what actors think is, I have to prove myself, I have to prove myself to this casting director, this producer, this director. No, don't prove yourself. You're already talented. You work hard. Go in for those 2 minutes, whether it's 90 seconds or 2 minutes, and really just have fun, but show them what you can do. Now, most people, most actors get into it because they like acting. They like telling stories. So use that 2 minute opportunity to tell that story of that character, and go all in, have fun, and when it's over, let it go. As soon as you walk out of that room, it is no longer in your control. You let it go.
And so you've come up with these 3 points, right? And you launched this company initially as, an agent, as a, helping talent. What was was there an aha moment when you realized that what you've been studying can help actors in such a better way? Like, did you have a client that just gave you that spark to take this to the next level where you're able to be not just an agent, but a coach, or, a mental coach, a mentalist that helps you get through the hurdles?
I think it was just over time when I realized, when I was again in the midst of my doctoral studies and doing this dissertation, how a lot of people, I was talking to a lot of people like, oh, this is so impactful. We really need to hear this. And of course, I would do like social media posts over the years. And a lot of my clients or actors that I knew would say, oh, I needed to hear that. And so my whole thing was, when I wrote the book and just before I really decided to, I kind of put myself out there, was I want to make a bigger impact, if I can. Obviously I'm helping the actors I work with, but that's only a small set. I would love to be impactful to other people because the mindset is so important. And I've studied NLP, I've studied psychology, performance psychology, and what I can tell you is how powerful mindset can be. And I think that was the moment where I really said I really need to be working more in this space. Because again, it may not make you necessarily a better actor overall, but because that's where training and practice comes in. Just like, mindset is not going to really make someone a better, more competitive player. However, if I can help you become the best you that you can be, I feel like that's very powerful. Like getting outside your head. Because one habit I've noticed over the years of working with actors, especially like more the newer actors, the actors that haven't worked in a while, they're so anxious about performing well that they get caught in their head and they're over analyzing things. So you can watch you can almost tell when you're watching these performances because they're not really listening to their scene partner. They're so focused on what line is going to come next. Oh, well, let me make sure I got my line to come out next. And you could see it where it's like you're watching a two people having a normal conversation in the scene, and it doesn't look authentic because there's the other person is just like a silent wall when the other one's talking, and that's how human beings communicate. And if you watch a movie or even watch a performance on stage and you look at professional actors, part of being a really, on top of your acting is not just of course acting but also reacting. So you can't really do that if you're in your head and you're focusing on what's my next line. I hope I get this line right. You're not even connecting to your scene partner. And now the audience members who are watching these performances or even watching a movie, may not be able to specifically point out what happened. But if you don't connect, what you're often going to get is, I didn't really buy this performance, or this actor wasn't that good, or I really didn't buy the storyline. And it's because the characters weren't connecting and being really authentic, or too much in their head, or not really, in the moment. So the mindset can really help you with that part of the puzzle.
When do you think, when somebody gets involved in acting and maybe they're thinking about auditions, maybe they're thinking about representation, at what point should this aspect of acting become a part of their training and their studies? When should you add in, the mental aspect of acting?
I think I wish if I had my way, it should be simultaneously with the actual mechanical training and technical training of acting. It should be done simultaneously. So this way, by the time they come out, after their BF Bachelor of Fine Arts, a Master of Fine Arts program, or the conservatory program, that they're fully prepared, not just acting wise, but mental wise and staying on. Because the one thing I've noticed, especially for the length of time I've been doing this, is that there's a high turnover rate amongst actors and high, getting a real, there's a lot of pressure from family. So there's a high dropout rate. So unfortunately, what I was saying is a lot of people were graduating from these programs, spending upwards of 100 to almost 200K on a program, and yet 4 or 5 years later, they're no longer acting. They're into teaching or doing some sort of consulting work. And I I kind of it's sad because a lot of money, and I don't even think they're happy doing this type of work, but they feel out of necessity that they have to do this type of work.
And through all these stories and your studies, you had mentioned, a book that you put together. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how can people, find out more about it?
Sure. Well, the book is called Rise Above the Script: Confronting Self Doubt and Mastering Self Sabotage for Performing Artists. It's available on Amazon, Kindle, and audiobooks, where all audiobooks are sold. And I did write it for the performing artists in mind, and that's what it's geared towards. But there's also a lot of good information in there that can be applicable to anybody: coaches, speakers, salespeople, any profession where you have to put yourself out there, which is pretty much everyone to some level. So I think there's a lot that can benefit from everybody, but especially actors. And yeah, I blend it a lot with some personal experiences, but I also have a lot of research back statements and protocols behind in the book.
And I know another area you're in is hypnotism, and is that something that really works with actors, or, hypnotizing and having some sort of therapy through hypnosis, does that really help relax them and send them into auditions?
It helps with the confidence boosting.
Yeah.
And another myth about hypnosis is it doesn't necessarily have to be about relaxation. That can be a side effect or a byproduct. But most of the time, I mean, we're hypnotized when we're watching a commercial. We're hypnotized when we're watching the news. We're hypnotized when we're watching a movie. So we don't necessarily have to be in relaxation. So the way I kind of use it is more of a waking hypnosis kind of thing, where it's like, okay, working with limiting beliefs, transforming limiting beliefs. So kind of like with the little bit of reframes that I kind of mentioned here, I blended a little bit of hypnotic work in there too because it's working with subconscious limiting beliefs. So another thing that I would really say is the power of language, because one of the biggest tools that for hypnosis work to occur is language. So the language that you use both not only to yourself, to the community, but to yourself. A lot of actors sometimes will introduce themselves like, "Hi, I'm John. I'm an aspiring actor," or "Hi, I'm Jill. I'm a starving artist." And it's like, no, what are you doing? And you're setting these words up. They're creating a reality. So what you should say is, I'm Jill. I'm a professional working actor, or I'm Jack. I'm a thriving, successful artist, and you introduce yourself in that framework. So that could be a very powerful shift. And that, again, is a hypnotic shift. If you can view yourself in that way of just moving from point A to point B. And, I do mention a little bit of this in my book too, because it's important how you identify yourself and because your identity is so important here. And if you identify yourself kind of like as, I don't want to say, but more like the one who's going to get trampled on over, or have like some sort of victim mentality, you're going to be at a more disadvantage in life than you say you're thriving and creative type. So that's where kind of like Rise Up to the Script, my title came out of, because I wasn't necessarily talking about like a physical script. I'm talking about the mental script that you have. And when you can rise above that and change that, that can be very powerful.
It's incredible. We met through an online booking agency to make this interview happen, and the more I learned about your story, and then I loved like just different perspectives. I always say that you can only perceive what you know, right? If you're familiar with something, you can perceive it and understand it. And this is a story where I understand acting and auditions and talent, but that mental aspect and applying a whole nother study, a whole nother field of the psychology to it makes your story just incredible. So, Dr. Albert Bramante, where can people find you? They want to connect with you, and I know you have a website. What's the web address?
So it's just my name, albertbramante.com. You can also go on LinkedIn under Albert Bramante. And then my Instagram is at Dr. Al Bramante. So feel free to connect with me. I'd love to hear from you, and definitely check out my book because I feel like there's something in there for everybody.
Awesome. I'll put all those links in the show notes. Let's go back to that theme song.
Yo, it's my guest tonight with Jeff Revilla, bringing heat like a scene from a thriller. Dr. Bramante in the house, breaking mental chains. From Broadway lights to big screen fame, talent agent, mind coach, triple threat mode, helping actors crack the success code. So turn it up, no fear, no strife. Let's talk self-sabotage and change your life.
I
Awesome.
love that.
I'm so glad you like the song. It's really, I mean, I have about 10 pages of notes on you. I tell everybody like I'm pretty thorough with the research I do, and I use that to make the songs, and they've been a pretty good hit. So I'm glad you like them.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll see this show on Broadway someday.
Hey, that'd be great.